Chapter 9. Whispers. It was about time. As early as June, Margo had been urging Emma to go after Johnny, especially when she herself began working towards a relationship with Jordan. Then came the months of denial, the repeated dismissal of feelings between them, but finally the wall had fallen, and Margo woke Sunday morning with an irrational grin on her face when she remembered what had happened the previous night. Per usual, she was awake and out of bed before Jordan. Emma deserved the morning to sleep, she thought, so alone Margo tossed on a sports bra, sweatshirt, and pair of leggings and made her way outside toward the school. She did it nearly every morning. In an otherwise empty weight room, Margo was able to mostly free her mind from anything that might bother it. When she was alone, adrenaline pumping through her body and her mind able to stay focused on nothing but working out, she was able to forget about Quebec, forget about her parents, forget about her siblings and where they might have ended up. If she was having a particularly bad day, a number of boxing gloves were open for the taking in the corner, and she would imagine her mother in place of the punching bag. Jordan and Emma had both asked her what her secret was to staying so fit. It was easy, she said plainly both times. But if she didn't have this as an outlet, she would probably end up dead. Therapy helped too. Her longtime counselor Jackie White was the only person she was completely honest with. There were truths Jordan was too defensive to know, and Emma too naive. Even Emma's parents had stayed willingly blind to the whole truth when they took her in. Jackie took the entirety, and Margo had to respect how many secrets that man must have stored inside his head on behalf of other people. Emma was supposed to start seeing him this week too. It had been Margo's advice to Mr. Guerin after her breakdown during training. Maybe it was too much to lay completely on the shoulders of a 14-year-old. Margo's torment was far more personal and had far fewer ramifications than Emma's, but as she had explained to the pair in their little debriefing session, if anyone could be trusted to confide a secret like that, it was Jackie. Her mind traveled to the night before as she switched from arms to legs. She wondered if Emma would tell Johnny now that they were together. He was certainly the last person Margo would share secrets with, given the whole never forgetting thing. But if he made Emma as happy as she appeared last night, then why not? She had not taken her eyes off him all night. She remembered seeing Liz and Kent together, and wondered what had gone down in their group. First there had been some sort of argument between one of Liz's friends and a boy, then after Liz went off with a boy Margo did not recognize, she returned to argue with the last of her other friends, after which she looked ready to burst into tears and ran off. Margo thought about chasing her, but was too worried about leaving Jordan to the wolves with how incredible he looked. Maybe she would come to regret that. Liz was a nice girl, and Margo was really starting to appreciate the balance she brought to everything. Even Kent seemed to have a good time, dancing with the other girl from the argument, though he too had disappeared before the night was over. Her thoughts were interrupted by movement in the mirror ahead of her. Approaching her from behind was a very muscular boy in a gray top, who had been eyeing her for weeks every time they shared the gym. She dropped the bar to the rack and turned. "Yes?" she said rather irritably. Sorry," he returned in a low voice. "Didn't mean to bother you. I've just noticed you around here the last few weeks." Margo stared at him without response, waiting for him to get to the point. "What are you working on?" he continued. Margo shrugged her shoulders. Lifting?" she retorted. The boy looked confused by her answer. "Well, yeah," he kept on. I'm Dylan." Again, Margo waited for him to get to the point. "And you are?" "Margo?" she returned, offering that much. "Margo," he repeated. "That's a pretty name." She choked. "What can I do for you, Dylan?" He stepped back, finally sensing her hostility. Well, I was just wondering if I could maybe buy you a coffee or something sometime." Margo rolled her eyes. "I have a boyfriend," she stated. He stayed put, apparently not reading her hints. "So, is that a no?" She crossed her arms. "Parles-tu français?" she asked. He knitted his eyebrows. "Sorry?" "Do you speak French?" she repeated. No, why?" She turned around and went back to her weights. "I only date boys who speak French." Dylan remained rooted behind her, still failing to understand her disinterest. After a long moment of contemplation, he turned and went back to his own station. Margo thought she heard a few insults under his breath as he walked away. Once seated on his bench, he kept staring, though this much she was used to and could handle. If anything, the looks helped feed her drive. It was the approaching part that bothered her, as if anyone other than Jordan had a chance. Sure, she had dated other boys before, and none of them spoke French. Until Jordan, she had never realized how much she missed having that kind of familiarity with someone else. Margo had spoken English as long as she could remember, and it had been the only thing she spoke for the last 5 years, but all of her thoughts were still in French. Her default would always be Quebecois, no matter how long she spent away from Canada. Even with Jordan's Haitian Creole, there was enough familiarity between them to make Margo feel at home again, without having to think about all the drama and pain that really entailed. Dylan remained in the room until Margo left, but she was almost certain he stopped lifting when she had shut him down. The grass between the two buildings was still wet from the night before, but the air was now cold and dry. Wind whipped the buttes as always, creating a whistling that seemed to chase itself around the circle. When she arrived back in the common room, Emma was sitting on the couch in her pajamas eating a caramel roll. "Hey," she welcomed. turning to see Margo coming through the front door. "Hey," Margo returned. "I figured you'd still be sleeping." "Well, how'd you get up for church?" Emma returned with a mouthful. "You and church," Margo chided. Emma rolled her eyes. "You're welcome to come if you feel so inclined." "I'll wait for Wednesday," she returned. "Once a week is good enough for me." "Never enough church," Emma continued to tease, taking another large bite out of the roll. "I can't listen to Jack preach for an hour," Margo replied. "There's a reason they make another night for people our age." "All right, that's fair," Emma conceded. "How was the gym?" "Fine," she stated, considering bringing up the conversation that interrupted her workout. Maybe Emma would feel better about being asked all the time, but maybe she wouldn't, knowing the questions came for a different reason. She decided to keep her mouth shut. "Johnny still sleeping?" Margo added. "No, he's in the shower." Emma returned quickly, poking her head up to catch herself. At least he told me he was going to—" "Relax," Margo laughed. "You know I know, right?" Emma's face turned red. "What do you—" "Jordan can see everything," Margo explained. Emma's hands went to cover her face. "Margo, you can't tell your parents?" she interrupted again. "Why in the world would I want to do that? We live on our own. You're your own person. It's none of their business." Emma took a deep breath. "Thank you." "Is that why you're going to extra church this morning?" Margo joked. "Need a little extra forgiveness or something?" "That's not how that works," Emma scolded, before adding, "And we haven't done anything." "Uh-huh," Margo winked. Emma's red face started to whiten. "Why are you so convinced everyone lives the same way you do? Why can't you believe some of us are decent people?" Margo shrugged. "Hey, you're the one sleeping with your boyfriend." "He's not my boyfriend!" Emma shouted, so loudly she might have woken the others. Margo held her hands up. "Whatever you say. And just because we fall asleep together doesn't make me the same as you." With these words, Margo knew she had pushed too far. Emma was nearly crying. "This is exactly why I didn't want you to know." Margo walked silently over to one of the chairs in the living room and sat down. She took a deep breath. "You know you can still trust me, right?" Emma blinked away tears. "I've never said anything to anyone about your effect. Why do you think I'd say something about you and Johnny?" Emma opened her mouth to answer, but struggled to find the right words. "To hold something over me?" she finally said. Margo looked her square in the eyes. "Emma, your family gave me a home here. You've been my best friend for 5 years. Even if I tease you sometimes, I'm never going to hold anything like that over your head. You don't deserve that." Emma wiped her face. Margo stood up to hug her. "I love you," she affirmed. "You know that, right?" Emma sniffled into her chest. A door opened off to the right. "I don't know what I missed," said Johnny, looking somewhat horror-struck. "But if it makes you feel any better, I love you too." Emma made a choking noise halfway between a laugh and a cry as she peeled herself from Margo. "Oh, for the love of God, just call him your boyfriend already," she cracked. Emma ran over to Johnny and hugged him just the same, and knowing they wouldn't kiss in front of her, Margo turned her back. In school the next day, they were comfortable enough to hold hands in the hallways. Behind them, Liz kept her eyes down on the floor, and for some reason, Kent looked utterly miserable. Margo figured something else must have happened between them and their third friend. At lunch, their table was noticeably quiet. Kent had disappeared, and the casual appearance of Andrew, which was pretty much daily, even in passing, was absent. Emma broke the news of a surprise mission for him and his squad, which apparently sent them overseas the day after the dance. That was one of the perks, if you could call it that, of proving your effectiveness to the organization. Less time to train for pop-up missions. His girlfriend Isla, with whom he had clearly made amends over the weekend, sat in silence amongst another group of older kids. Margo thought about inviting her over, but figured bringing her in with freshmen might break some sort of social etiquette. In missions training, Xander announced a schedule for returning to normalcy. They would still be taking it easy, but the squad was once again under pressure to prove their worth to the organization, and the board wanted to see them in action at least before the end of the school year. In all honesty, Margo hoped their first mission would arrive sooner. The expectation at the start of the year, which had since disappeared, left her bored most afternoons, and she found herself longing for the same intensity that preceded their failed stress test. Emma's health was more important, though. If that meant taking a step back for her sake, then Margo could tolerate the boredom. As they went off to the floor to practice a search and destroy initiative, she turned to ask Emma if she was okay with it, but apparently she had known this was coming. "It's okay," she whispered. "Dad's had me throwing again. I'll be fine." The training session went off without a hitch, with Emma being the one to take down the final target, eschewing her rifle for her knives. Margo could not help but grin. On Tuesday, a similar session was preceded by a rather awkward lecture in their science lab about adrenaline and its importance in the consistency of their effects. Mr. Kelster droned on about how their effects were at the performing best when influenced by fear and adrenaline, and how it was crucial to the success of their missions that they remain on heightened alert every second of their training. That wasn't the awkward part. "In collaboration with your language class," Kelster began, "you are to write an essay about your biggest fears, and how you can use them as motivation during your missions to keep you performing at your very best. Nothing crazy, 3 to 5 pages or so. just outlining what you feel when confronted by those fears and how they can be translated to you and your squad's benefit. A girl in the other squad raised her hand. Sir, are we going to have to share these with our squads? Kelster would have laughed if he had the personality to do so. I certainly hope you will, he replied. After all, it's their lives that are influenced by these fears. Perhaps it's worth them knowing. Everyone in the lab turned their eyes nervously around the room. Liz had turned white. To Margot's relief, Emma looked relaxed, which gave her a small satisfaction. If Emma wasn't planning on being completely truthful, then neither would she, and she most certainly wouldn't be writing about her father. The next morning, a test on linear functions put everyone else in the squad in a sour mood. They had seen a rise in homework over the past few weeks, but math was one of Margot's strong suits, breezing through the thing and feeling confident in at least a 95. Kent still found it difficult to believe Margo was good at something academic, which he tried to take as more of a compliment than a slight, then proceeded to tease him about his speed. His speed came in handy during fitness. Just to show off, he ran his portion of their squad relay backwards, still obliterating his competition despite almost biffing it near the finish line. This time Jordan took over the bullying, noting that they still had not seen Kent run forward the way they knew he wanted to. Xander seemed off during their afternoon training, like something at home was leaking into his work hours. He dismissed all their questions about it, but his attitude only seemed to worsen, and as if to take it out on them, chose to separate them for individual training exercises while the others watched. Margo was tasked with weaving her way through a simulated minefield, and after failing on 3 separate attempts to make it to the final quarter of the field, heard an earful from Xander about learning from her mistakes. She chose to ignore it. He kept glancing at Emma anyway. That night, Margo was actually looking forward to youth group. Now that homecoming was over, anything that shook up the mundanity of any normal day was something she appreciated, which meant church once a week was no exception. Emma had once again offered an invite to Kent, promising it would cheer him up after the stress of the previous day's assignments and exercises, but per usual they were met with a crude answer. This time, why the hell would I believe in a god? Margo sometimes wondered this herself, but thought Kent's approach to his answer could have been toned down a hair. Emma, in her naivety, responded with, "Why the hell wouldn't you?" To which Kent simply turned shoulder and went home. The others returned to the school for a dinner titled Pacific Salmon Feast, after which the two couples took the rail across town to Destiny Baptist. The building was more like an arena than a church. A large circular room stood home to another large circular stage, around which rows of seats were bolted to the sloped floor like an auditorium. High above them, a ring of upper-deck seating looked down upon the cross, which Margo knew was fairly common in larger congregations, but the real eye-catcher was the floor of box suites that separated the seated sections. Emma's family owned one, in which were photos consisting of all types of family arrangements, most with all 3 of the Guerin children, but some without Riley and some including Margo. The religious equivalent of Live, Laugh, Love artwork was plastered around the little room, along with a pair of armchairs which faced a TV tuned to the church's service stream. Missing the glass partition that would have completed the arena atmosphere, the end facing the sanctuary housed 2 rows with a total of 8 black leather seats. It was there that they would have sat on Sunday, but youth services were typically more intimate, with the congregants dissuaded from watching from the upper floors. Instead, any adults in attendance stood in the back, while the middle and high schoolers crowded near the stage in a sort of mock pit. Emma released Johnny's hand as soon as they entered the sanctuary. "You know you don't have to hide it from your parents, right?" Margo whispered as they walked through the doors. Emma turned around looking ready to retort, but stopped herself. "I don't see them." It was true. The Guerins were usually plastered against the back wall directly below their box on a Wednesday night, but they were conspicuously absent. "Did they say anything?" Margo wondered aloud. Emma checked her phone. "Nothing." "Well, maybe something came up," Jordan interjected. "It's probably nothing." They kept walking toward the front, Emma repeatedly swiveling around to see if her parents had arrived, but their seats remained empty. On the stage, a countdown from 5 minutes was accompanied with swinging lights and smoke machines, masking the cross at the back in a thick layer of illuminated fog. When the countdown approached 0, the usual team of musicians made their way to their spots and started playing the first song. It was the same as always. 4 loud, bombastic power ballads from some songwriting factory in Los Angeles, with the most minute message about God, always accompanied by some show-offy performance from the lead singer or guitar player. It was still a distraction, but it reminded Margo why she hated church so much. It was so much of a show that it felt like a competition to see who could prove their worthiness over everyone else. The people raising their hands the highest and singing the loudest were the same people doing stupid things in their cars in the church parking lot before the service. Margo didn't have the confidence to say that God didn't exist, but if he did, she figured this probably wasn't living up to his standards. After a short message from their youth pastor, they were separated into their small groups, where they said goodbye to the boys and sat through a half-hour of discussion on Luke 12:3. Margo thought the topic was fitting for their group. 2 girls sat in opposite sides of their circle had been notorious in middle school for spreading rumors about each other, hence why they were no longer friends. Everyone else's eyes seemed to linger towards them as well. When this concluded, they all met in the youth room for a social hour, a large warehouse-like room plastered on the backside of the church. Jordan and Johnny were over against one wall, playing a youth-friendly version of water pong alongside 2 older boys Margo did not recognize. She and Emma made it to the table just for a few seconds before they were interrupted by a familiar voice. Hey, Emma, can I chat with you in private for a sec? It was Pastor Luke, the short, stocky 20-something in charge of the whole youth ministry. Emma's face turned white as though he was about to confront her about her deepest, darkest secrets. She looked at the other three, then turned. Yeah, sure. They stepped aside, but to Margo's surprise did not venture out of the room, instead standing beside a support beam and chatting like they were everyday pals. Occasionally, Emma would cross her arms, realize she was doing so, and then hastily uncross them. What do you think that's about? Jordan asked. Before either Johnny or Margo could respond, Luke called out, Hey, Johnny, come here quick. Johnny looked cautiously toward the other two, with Margo comforting him by offering, I'll take your spot, don't worry. Johnny scampered over to the pole, with Margo taking a ball and bouncing it off the edge of a cup. Seriously, what do you think that's about? Jordan asked more nervously. You didn't tell anyone, did you? Jordan, why would I do that? She huffed defensively. And even if I did, why would they be in trouble? He sighed, taking his own throw and missing the table completely. I don't know, he argued. 'Cause it's a church? A church operating underneath the embassy, she reminded him, whose laws are more important. He shrugged. I suppose you're right. Margo had seen it play out plenty of times. Anytime a high schooler was confronted about their conduct outside of the church, all they had to do was bring up the town's rules, and that was the end of it. The church operated at the mercy of the organization, which was also why the Sixth Commandment was so often washed over. The conversation did not last long, and before Margo had even taken her next turn, the pair had returned, both with emotionless faces. Well? She started. Did he chew you out or give you his blessing? Huh? Emma responded, apparently confused. Oh, it had nothing to do with us dating. Then why? He wanted to know if we wanted to get baptized this year, she said nonchalantly, taking the balls from Margo's hand and wiping the table in a single turn. He didn't ask about you two at all? Jordan continued. Why would he? Emma responded, grinning at her return to form. It's not his business, is it? At the end of the hour, the four made their way back around the front of the sanctuary, where Emma had once again hoped to find her parents, but they remained missing. The other adults sat huddled in the back, finishing their glasses of wine, Bibles closed. I'm sure it's fine, Margo reassured, seeing Emma's face drop. The dishwasher probably broke or something. She returned her hand to Johnny's as they left the church alone, riding the rail back to the residential center. Margo realized how little she had been focusing on Jordan, and she took his hand too. She rested her head on his bony shoulder as the rain rattled the car around the city, the sky black and windy beyond the windows. His heart was pounding harder than usual. She looked up. He seemed distracted by something, almost irritated. What's up? She whispered. He held up a finger. Wait until we're off this thing, he said. Margo did as she was told. When they were back to the residential center, the pair took a step back from the other two, telling them to go ahead to the elevator without them. Instead, they took the stairs. Is Xander still hounding you for something on Emma? She pieced together. Jordan nodded. He thinks I'm hiding something. I haven't given him anything, and I don't think he trusts me anymore. Well, it's BS he's asking you to spy in the first place, Margo argued. Tell me you don't know anything. You don't think I've done that already? He raised. I was trying to see if she would tell Pastor Luke anything, but she was being honest about the whole baptism thing. Maybe she's not hiding anything, Margo offered, trying to move off the topic. Maybe there's nothing Xander doesn't know about, and he's just being paranoid. I mean, don't you think it's a little creepy that he's hiring a teenager to gather dirt on another teenager? Not the way he puts it, Jordan defended. And we both know she is hiding something. I'm just trying to... He paused, staring at Margo. There was a menace in his eyes she had never seen. You know, don't you? Margo stepped back on the landing. What? You know what she's hiding, he accused. What her dad is hiding too? Of course you would know. You freaking lived with them. Margo took a shallow breath. Jordan's look was manic. Why the hell wouldn't you tell me? Margo had no idea how to react. She pressed her hands against the wall. Jordan, I don't... Yes, you do, he pestered. There's no way you wouldn't know. She tells you everything. If there's something you don't know about her, she hasn't told me. Liar, he shouted, and it echoed down the stairwell. Margo's breathing grew heavier. Jordan, I'm telling you the truth. I don't... Why should I believe you now if you've been lying to me this whole time? I'm not lying to you, she fidgeted. You are, he screamed. I can feel you lying to me right now. You're hiding something. You're covering up for Garen too. I know you are. Jordan. Margo paused. He was terrifying her, his eyes wide in a crazed accusation. Of course he knew she was lying, and part of her wanted to spill everything just to bring him back to himself. But she couldn't. Not after promising to Emma she would keep things quiet. Jordan started shouting before she even got the chance to decide. I'm sick of people hiding things from me, he continued. Jordan. No, you know what? Screw you. I'll figure it out myself. He turned from her and bounded up the stairs. Jordan! She shouted, trying to chase after him, but he was too fast and did not care to listen. At the top of the landing, she saw him bust through the front door of the common room. If anything, she was worried he might barge in and start accusing Emma without warning. She sprinted to the door to catch it before it closed. Inside, Jordan had stopped in his tracks. The TV was on, turned to the news as usual. Emma and Johnny stood hand in hand, frozen just the same, a few feet behind the couch. To Margo's surprise, Liz and Kent were on the couch watching too. The familiar face of the new president of Poland was plastered to the screen. "It's been on this for the last hour," Liz claimed. There's a shallow terror in her voice. "I thought you wanted to know about it." Chervinsky was rambling in Polish, but the subtitles were easy enough to follow. "The attempt against my life is a cowardly act by individuals too weak to accept the wants of the people. To approve of such an act is a declaration of war against the Polish people and democracy itself. The individuals responsible have been captured and dealt with, and their employers will soon be confronted with the same. I will make an example of them and their allies, the likes of which has never been seen but by the almighty hand of God. He alone will have the strength to forgive me. Europe and NATO and all their allies will be brought to justice, weighed against the hypocrisy of the lies of peace they preach." The camera cut to a large city square, in which a gallows had been hastily constructed. 3 men were marched to the center and their heads placed inside nooses. The first Margo recognized as the former president. The second was short, with pale skin and puffy eyes. Margo did not know his face, but certainly knew the outfit. Torn to shreds but still recognizable, he and the boy to his left wore the same skin-tight black mission suit of the IREA. To her horror, she knew the third immediately. Beaten and whipped, but still the same black face which had joined their lunch table just weeks before, was Andrew's best friend Sam. The floor dropped before any of them could turn their eyes. Margo could not help but grab Jordan's hand and yelp along with the others. Emma's phone began to ring. "Oh God," she whimpered. "Andrew."